Hey Vibrant Life family, it's Dr. Lauren. This Friday, I wanted to chat with you about the vagus nerve again. So, if you can't tell by now, the vagus is one of my favorites. It is the 10th cranial nerve, and it starts from in your brainstem, and they call it the wanderer because it travels down and it innervates so many important internal organs. So it directs our gut function, it directs our cardiac function, our respiratory function, our mood. It's a big key to our foundational health and wellness. So when we talk about the vagus, what they've identified in the research and the literature is there's something called heart rate variability that serves as a good indicator for measuring the function of the vagus. Heart rate variability, or HRV, essentially is measuring the variance in between our heartbeats. So when you measure your heart rate, you measure it over a certain period of time, and you find maybe it's like 60 beats per minute. And you may have this idea that, okay, my heart will beat once a second. But what they find is that there's variation in that, especially between breathing in and breathing out. And so one beat might be 1.1 second, and the next one might be 0.95 seconds. So the more variation there is, the higher your heart rate variability will be. So the phrase that I really love is that a happy heart dances. Now, before, when they talked about the vagus, the idea put across to clinicians is that the higher the HRV, the better. And so if you want to have good vagal tone, you need to make sure your HRV is higher. But now in the literature, they're kind of teasing out the ideal value. And unfortunately, there is no ideal value, so I can't give that to you today. But what I want you to know is that besides having high vagal tone, which allows us to exist in a rest, digest, connect state in our nervous system, so it's a very calming, it's a very connective state, and this is where we want to spend the majority of our time in. The thing though that can happen is if our vagus, if our vagal tone gets too high, if our heart rate variability gets too high, it might be an indicator that we're actually operating in another portion of our vagus called the dorsal vagus. So the ventral vagus is myelinated, meaning that it works really quickly. Nerve impulses travel along it really well. And this portion, the ventral vagus, the myelinated version of the vagus, is what keeps us in that social engagement or in that rest, digest, connect mode. If we have an HRV that measures high, like too high is what they're finding out, that could be an indicator that we're actually in our dorsal vagus and we're actually in a freeze or fawn mode, meaning we've had so much stress on our body that we've come out of social engagement, we've taxed out our fight or flight, and we've gone into almost like a hibernation mode where we're kind of trying to escape from the stress. And if we're in this mode, our heart rate variability can actually be too high. And so the point of this is that we don't want, it's not like we want our HRV to be high or our autonomic nervous system to be functioning in this high space. We want it to be balanced. We want there to be a good balance between going from our social engagement and maybe having to drop down into sympathetics when we have, when we're exercising or we're in a state that requires us to be more aroused, if we're need to be more vigilant is the word I was looking for. That's an okay state to go in and then come back out of. And it's even okay to go into parasympathetics, while we're sleeping, we may be operating from both sides of our vagus, is what they found. So the idea is that we need to have resiliency to move through these different states in our nervous system and then be able to move back. So if you're investigating your HRV and it's constantly reading super, super high and you feel more like shut down and you feel like you freeze up, or you feel like you're always people pleasing to try and feel safe, this could be a sign that you're actually even operating from your dorsal vagus. And when we're down in that state, we actually need to kind of make our way back up through our layers of our nervous system. So some better support would be activities that more get our system going. Things like dancing, laughing, singing, getting good social engagement if that feels safe to you. Really quick cold exposure, like 20-30 seconds at the end of a shower, turning it cold. So these types of things can help draw your body out of that dorsal vagus state so that you can heal better and eventually access that ventral vagus and work on your autonomic nervous system so that you can come in and out of these states as needed and you don't stay stuck, whether that's in the sympathetic fight or flight or even stay stuck in that dorsal vagus, that freeze state. So I hope this brings more clarity to the vagus and the autonomic nervous system function. Ideally, we want to be operating from our ventral vagus where we're connected, we're able to rest, we're able to digest. But be aware that we may shift down into these other states, and that is completely physiologically normal. We need to, though, be able to shift back out. And so I mentioned some things that can help support that vagus and shift us out into that ventral vagus, so that you can take control of how your body is functioning and how your body is interfacing with your environment. So I hope this helps. If you have any questions, feel free to chat with Dr. Jake and I, and try some of those activities, especially if you feel like you are existing in that freeze state.